known Justin for about 20 plus years. I knew of his work before I met him. I worked with him for 1 year at the University of Arizona. It's a pretty interesting story. I had his job for a year. And then he came back and he's like, I want my job back. And I said, well, I want to be here. And they actually found a space for me to be for 1 year to have a job, and we worked together. And then we both left at the same time. I went to a different school, and he went into the industry. For 15 years, he worked as a researcher with multiple companies. At one point in time, he was the vice president of research, and he researched a show, maybe you might have seen it, it's called Lost. He was a researcher, audience researcher on that. He did audience research for Grey's Anatomy. He's done audience research for E! Exclamation mark, right? And the Kardashians, yes. He's specifically responsible for the Kardashians, so you can either thank him or but as he'll tell you, if you ask him at the end of this, he learned a lot studying what people thought about the Kardashians. I think it's really interesting what he learned, because he didn't go out there to find out how to sell the show. He went out to find out what people thought about these characters. And what he's told me and what I've learned from him is you can't always predict what people think about these characters. So in many ways, actually, I thank him because he was partially responsible for my first job in academics. And he's a great professor. He holds a PhD from UCLA. Right now, he's an assistant professor at University of Rhode Island. He took the position a couple of years ago. When he left as one of the head researchers at Country Music Television in Nashville, he took a job at URI, and he's here doing more research. He's doing a research project on audience studies. Capturing the Phantom Viewer is his new project. He's also writing about Sofia Coppola films, independent cinema. Yeah, he's extremely well versed, and I hope that you will have questions for him at the end of the speech. And I'd like to thank you for being here and introduce Dr. Justin Wyatt.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. So excited to be at OUU, and even just like in a few hours, I've just been like overwhelmed with the good energy and the really friendly, engaged people that I've met. So hopefully this will be interesting for half an hour. Because I don't want to bore you. Tim asked me a few months ago. It's like, could you talk about what it was like to be a gay man working in Hollywood? And I was like, sure, I could. And so I came with this idea out in media industries, or being yourself in Hollywood. And Tim kind of mentioned this, but this is my background. Is I've got 3 careers. I was a professor in the 90s. I taught at North Texas, Queens College in Arizona. And I got lured to work in the media industry during the .com boom. So I left my tenured job. Some people thought I was crazy. Some people were jealous. And I went to work for a consulting agency. My major client was ABC. I worked for ABC, and then I worked for NBCUniversal and Viacom for the music channels, mostly for CMT, Country Music Television. I knew when I left that I loved being a teacher, and I loved my students. So I knew that I wanted to come back to the classrooms. So it was always my goal to return to the classroom at a certain point. I just didn't think I was going to be gone 15 years. It was like a long time, but eventually I was like, I've got to get back, So 2 years ago I came back, and I'm so happy that I have. Okay, so question, why listen to me? I don't even give a bother. Okay. Here's what I'll tell you. Whenever anyone gives you advice, they're only talking about themselves. Okay? So if anyone says, like, oh, I'm going to give you advice about this or that, I'm going to tell you how to do something. No, they're just talking about themselves. So I'm going to stand up here right now and say, I'm just telling you about myself. All right? It's just me. That's all you're going to get. That's all I can give you. And to say anything more would be a lie to you. All right? So you're going to get me. That's all I can offer. Some things I tell you might be interesting. Some things might be useful. Some things won't apply at all. Some things will be like, oh, who cares? But what I've asked you to do is think that I worked as a market researcher. I listened to people talk for 15 years about why they like certain TV shows, why they like certain music, why they did this, what motivated them, what was important in their lives, what's not important. And the more I did it, the more fascinated I was. Because what I learned was, people are so interesting, and you can learn from everybody. So now when I'm back in the classroom teaching, I learn so much from my students because their perspectives are not mine. Their background is not mine. And I get so much as an individual from that. So what I'd ask you to do is, even if it doesn't apply to you, think about your own story, your own dreams, your own goals, and how what I'm saying might be interesting. All right? So that's all my caveats on what I'm doing today. It's all about me. Okay. People will be like, okay, well, you're a gay man, you're a white middle-class gay man, so life hasn't been that tough, and life has not been that tough. I've had a lot of privilege. I know that. My perspective is, as a gay man, I was too young for Stonewall. I was 5 years old, okay, during the Stonewall riots, so I do not count for that. I was age 18 when the first New York Times article about HIV and AIDS came out, okay? So I came with sexual maturation right when HIV came on the scene, okay? So a lot of my life as a gay man is about that in one way or another. It's engaging with the issues of HIV and AIDS and dealing with the epidemic. Friends 5 years older than I was had been to dozens of funerals by the late 80s and early 90s. And so I was like shocked, you know, because I was like, I'm so lucky to be alive. And I really felt like if I had been born 5 years earlier, I would probably be dead.
Wow.
So a lot of my perspective about being gay is the thanks that I have for being alive. And in the back of my mind, a lot of it's about living for the gay men who aren't here anymore. Because I didn't have HIV, I didn't have AIDS. So I have a responsibility to live a productive life and to carry on the legacy. That's how I see it. Representation was crucial, you know. When I was teaching in Texas, North Texas, I taught a course called AIDS, Mass Media, and Cultural Politics. And yes, I understand, you know, not everybody who's gay has HIV, I get that. But what I was doing is engaging with the issues and how the public and the media was dealing with these issues. And I really thought it was important because no one else was talking about this stuff in Texas at the time, in the early 90s. I was the first faculty member. When I got to North Texas, I called up the LGBT group and I said, hey, listen, I write on LGBT issues. Can I come talk to your group? And they said, no faculty members ever wanted to come talk to us before. And I was like, well, that's a shame. You know, I'll be the first. Representing and being there and playing a role is absolutely crucial to the way I live my life. My adult life in my early 50s is still all about negotiating what it means to be gay. And I'm like, what? Still? I have to talk about being gay over and over and over again? And it's like a never-ending process, you know? I figured it out. I know what it means to be gay, okay? It's more like there needs to be a continual negotiation of how being gay fits into social structures and cultural structures. And that changes as time, because society's changing, culture's changing. So my role in that, and placing myself into that, changes, you know? Okay. This image probably had the most impact on me as a gay man than any other image. This is an image from 1990 about a Midwestern man who's dying of AIDS, being embraced by his father, his mother, his sister. And it's the image that stuck with me because I was like, it's about dignity, but it's about love. It's about carrying on, it's about family. And all these things, this is the lesson. I want to live my life this way, you know? So this is an image that stays with me. And it has a huge impact. Okay. Now, after getting all choked up, you're like, well, I think this is about the media industries. Yes, it is about the media industries. But I have to tell you, it's all about bringing your whole self to work. One of the great things about the millennial generation, and remember, I didn't teach for 15 years and I came back. When I talk to my students now, I feel much closer to them than I did my students in the 90s. Because your generation of students are more about living transparently living right there, living without artifice, and being real. It's what you're about. And I'm like, that's how I've always wanted to live my life. So I feel like there's a connection there. You have to minimize compromise. It's simple, even if other people want to make it difficult. This is the crucial thing I want to leave with you. Even if people want to make your identity difficult, it doesn't have to be. Your identity can be pure. Just go forward. Your vision of who you are as a person can take you really far in life. Don't let others complicate that and make you question yourself and confound your vision, okay? Be true to yourself. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Okay, one thing I should have told you is, because some of this is very heavy, watch out for fun facts, okay? So, in this presentation, I put in some fun facts because some of it is very heavy, and I feel like privileged to talk to you today about this. But I also want you to know who I am as an individual, because I'm not just about being gay and being an industry person. I'm lots of other things too. So I put in some fun facts. Okay, next. All right. So you're getting some fun facts. The first one's coming up right now. Okay. I was born in England. Okay. There I am. Age 6, holding a kitten. There I am. Look at that. Look. Oh, it's so serious. Marmite. I love Marmite. If you're in England. Oh, Marmite. It's like business. Okay, it's the first fun fact. I was born in England. Lost my accent, though, guys. You can tell. All right. Be careful. Be yourself, but be careful. There's an assumption that if you're transparent, if you're real, that you're going to be appreciated, you'll be respected, you'll be rewarded for that. A lot of times that's true. People do like that. Not everyone. Okay? You got to be careful. That's not true for all. That's not true for all, even in your tribe. Okay? So there's some people, LGBTQ, who would be like, okay, the fact that you're out and you live your life this way, not how I would do things, and I'm going to bring you down a little bit. Okay? So don't think, just because somebody's in your tribe, that they're always going to be on your side. Okay? It took me years to figure that out. Because I kept assuming, of course they're on you. They're in my tribe. They're going to be on my side. Not always. Sometimes being out is a problem for others. The closet, even in 2017, is still alluring for many people. Compartmentalizing lives so that you're out to some people and not to others, and not to others is really compelling. Here's what I tell you. The stronger you are in yourself, the less people can manipulate you. If you know who you are, if you know what's important, if you know why you get up in the morning, people won't be able to manipulate you. Okay? All right. You can't speak for all LGBTQ, and don't let others make you. Okay, a trap is to be like, well, you're an out individual, so let me ask you what the gay people think about this. I can't represent, okay, all gay men, and I can't represent LGBTQ. All I can represent is myself. When people push you to take an opinion or to say, well, I'm representing people, I'm representing this group, don't do it, all right? It's a trap. It's a way of containing your sexuality. Speak for yourself. You cannot be reduced to gender and sexuality categories. It's part of you, yes. It's not all of you. Okay? Oh, wait, another fun fact. I love cats. Oh, look at this. There I am again, 6 years old with a cat. This is my cat from Nashville, Peaches, Little Bub, and of course, Colonel Meow and Mr. Whiskers, the second kitty. So, this actually links to my talk. Because when I was in the industry, people knew that I was an out gay man. They knew I had a partner, and I've been with my partner, get this, guys, 31 years I've been with my partner. So that's a lot of time. I have colleagues who talk in the group, and they'd be like, oh, you're deciding to do the baseball game. What did you do? And then they come to me like, oh, how are your cats? And so they wouldn't ask about my children. They didn't have children, but they asked about my cats. And at first I was like, you really kind of put me down. But then I kind of got into it. And I would tell them a lot about what the cats did, what their habits were, what treats were their favorite. You know, and I really just went with it. So I love cats. It's also kind of the way I deal with being gay. Okay. Mentors can be great for life and work. Okay, what can I tell you about this? When I was growing up in the 70s, in the media, there were very few gay role models. Paul Lynde was this guy who was on the Hollywood Squares, who was totally over the top. And everyone knew he was gay, but he couldn't say he was gay. And I was like, okay, that's the one gay person I know. Maybe there's other people out there. It affected me in a certain way because I realized when I was an adult, I didn't have people I could look to at different life stages and be like, okay, this is what I can expect from being gay when I'm 30, when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm 60. They weren't there. My parents basically disowned me. My father said he didn't love me anymore, so I knew my family wasn't going to be there for me. Okay? So the idea of having role models was crucial to me. Becoming a professional. Understand that you can follow the path that you want. Know that your path will be different than your mentor. I have a very special mentor who is no longer with us. Died in 2001. A guy named John Ardine. When I was teaching in Texas, University of North Texas, he was the classical music critic for the Dallas Morning News. He wrote about opera and Maria Callas. I didn't know anything about that stuff. It's not my thing. What I knew was that John was about 60 years old. I was 30. And that John had such a lust for life, and he was so joyful, and he really loved what he was doing, and he was so into every single day. And I was like, whoa, this is what I want to be like when I'm 60. This is somebody that I can see. He's a role model for me, because you don't have to be like old and defeated and living in your apartment by yourself when you're 60 and you're a gay man. You can be like John. And you'd be like, isn't that kind of obvious? No, to me it was revelation. It was huge. It was absolutely huge. So this is all about John's articles and books, and here he is. And he actually told me he lived in New York in the 50s, and he told me he was friends with Andy Warhol. So we had these Andy Warhol stories. And I was like, yeah, okay, John. But then when I Googled to find these images, one of the first images that came up for John Ardine was with Andy Warhol. So he actually was friends with Warhol. So anyway, all that's to say is that when you find somebody that you can look to, and you can be like, this is a person that I can learn from, that I can follow their path. I'm going to make my own path too, but there are things about it that will be impactful for me. Do it. Mentors are given to us for a reason. We're going to learn from them, and they also love having a mentee. They love having somebody that they can work with. You know? Okay. Stand by your convictions. Unacceptable behavior is unacceptable. All right? Be resolute in knowing the lines, and be aware that having convictions won't make you the most liked person in the room. Okay? If you want to be liked, don't have convictions. Don't have opinions. All right? That's what I can tell you. However, it's easier to have opinions and have convictions and to be a complex person. I'm not going to be the most liked person. All right? Here's what I'll tell you. This is from Unknown. If your number one goal is to make sure that everyone likes and approves of you, then you risk sacrificing your uniqueness and your excellence. So I want to tell you some things that were said to me when I worked in the industry. And I want you to think about how would you react to this if you were in my shoes. And somebody said this to you. Okay. So one of my bosses said, I'm bisexual. You're the first person I've ever told. My wife doesn't even know. And they're saying this, they know I'm an out gay man. Okay. All right, well, that's inappropriate, for lots of different reasons. Do you then go to HR and create a lawsuit when you know that the company, let's pick a company out here, Disney, probably has huge lawyers with a lot of money, and you probably would lose? Or Do you let it go and try and negotiate the relationship? Difficult, yes? I love you, buddy. Why can't you be a little less gay? Well, it's not like I have a switch to turn on and off. You know, it's like I can't be less myself. So you don't know how to react to that. It's kind of a flirtation again, but absolutely inappropriate. This one, I'll have to tell you about. I told another boss that I was going to visit relatives in Wyoming. And he said, "You're going to see relatives in Wyoming? You know where a good place is for a gay man in Wyoming? On the fence, like Matthew Shepard." Okay, Matthew Shepard was a young college student who was lured by some guys. He was pistol whipped, left on a fence to die. And he did die, 1998. So, how would you feel if your boss said that to you? You know where a good place is for a gay man in Wyoming? On the fence, like Matthew Shepard. That is such a horrendous thing to say. And even now, 19 years later, I'm choking up just saying it. This is like so nasty. That I did take to HR. Because I was like, there's no way that I can live with myself having taken that comment. And there's no way I can live with Matthew Shepard's legacy if I do not respond to this. And I did. And it created a lot of trouble, but the outcome was okay. And again, my point to you is just that people may say stuff to you that is inappropriate, really inappropriate. There's a line. The flirtation stuff, this is the line for me, where it is so offensive and strikes to the core of who I was as a person that I just couldn't live with myself unless I responded to it. So, people will be like, well, working in the media industry, is this an easy being gay? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We're not talking like 1970 it's going on. This is like 10 years ago that this happened. Okay, so there's Matthew. All right. How is being LGBT useful for working in the industry? I believe that if you're an LGBT individual, you have the capacity for compassion and for understanding other viewpoints and perspectives. I believe that being LGBTQ places you in a unique situation in this world to understand people, to understand others, to feel for others and have compassion. And that's huge. If what I was doing was being a media researcher, I wanted to understand opinions of people. I had to understand a wide variety of people, and part of the reason I did that well is because I'm gay. You are unique individuals with a strength of character. This will enhance your contribution and the workplace too. The fact is, if you're LGBTQ, having to go through being LGBTQ in this society, you have been through a huge amount of trial already. And you have a strength of character just surviving, being here. And you will bring that to the workplace, and the workplace will benefit from it. Okay? You have a chance to foster pro-social change just by being yourself. Okay? That's a pretty awesome thing. We all represent who we are, where we've been, and what's important to us as individuals. Being LGBTQ is, in some ways, a real blessing. In some ways, it's a challenge. And we have to look at it in both those ways, I think. Okay. Tips for surviving in the media industries. Okay, here's the tactile tips. What can I tell you about surviving? Keep your ego in check. Paying your dues has a meaning. If you want to go work in the media industries, jump in, get that first job, start building your network. We were talking about this earlier. Collaboration is absolutely key. a lot of the students, when I talk to them about what work in the industry, they're like, well, I've got this great idea for a project, but I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm not going to collaborate with anyone because it's so amazing. I'll become famous. I'm like, no. That's not what it's about. It's really about working with others. It's really about collaborating with other people, joining together, and my idea might be good, but then if Tim has an idea, I'm like, that's way better than my idea. Let's say Tim's idea, morph it a little bit and do this. The idea of collaborating, joining with others, growing, absolutely crucial. Build your network helps a lot. That is the go-to for the next job. I've worked at several different companies, some term employment, sometimes long-term employment. I never got a job from an online ad. I rarely got a job from a recruiter. It was all about my network of friends and professional colleagues. That's how you get your jobs. Trust your instincts. If something seems wrong, don't doubt yourself. It probably is wrong. Okay. It's a small world. In Hollywood, job security and longevity are rare. Contract employment of all types is most typical. The most important asset is you, your personal brand, what you represent. So when somebody hires you, what do you bring to the table? This is going to sustain you. Your network grows when people realize that they can trust you, that you care about what you're doing, and that you're professional. That trust, if they know that a problem's going to come up on a set or in a production, and that you're the one there dealing with it, if they trust you, they'll be like, okay, you're going to have a good solution. I trust you to make the right decision. That trust comes from experience and being professional and caring about what you do. Be someone that others want to be around. This seems obvious, okay? It's not all about like, oh my goodness, I got this GPA and I got this course, I got this credential. Yeah, everyone does. Okay? It's really about, are you somebody who's competent and who's a nice person that people want to interact with and want to have a back and forth with? Oh, that's really important, Lots of qualified people wanting to work in the industry. Understanding interpersonal communication is key to making a difference. Oh, fun fact. I'm a huge movie fan. Okay. All these are some of my favorite movies. This one came out this year. If you haven't seen it, you should leave this presentation right now.
No.
A ghost story. Okay. Employee affinity groups. My most positive experience being gay was being part of the LGBTQ affinity group. These large conglomerates will oftentimes have affinity groups for different employees. So I was one of the hub leaders out at NBCU. It was LGBTQ employees and straight allies. Okay. This is in LA, we had 600 members. I would guess 200 members were LGBTQ. 400 members were straight allies. And I loved that about it because I was like, hey, these people want to walk my walk. They really want to be there for me. And one of the funniest moments I have, somebody I worked with, she was like, I'm so mad. I'm like, what's wrong, Irene? She goes, somebody outed me as straight. And so she didn't want to be known as straight, but somebody said, oh, Irene's not gay. So she's like, no. I was outed as straight, can't stand that. We would do pro-social events, and this is a great thing that NBCU was behind. So we did a clothing drive at LA Center's, LA Lesbian and Gay Center's Jeff Griffith Youth Center. And we literally, the idea was to get clothes that homeless youth could use for job interviews. So we literally spent a month going door to door, doing an event, canvassing, and then we hosted a reception at a local bar that was covered by Fashion Police, one of the shows on NBCUniversal. And we got Joan Rivers to introduce the segment. So here you have, which I think to be actually a really good sign, a huge company, NBCUniversal, they're actually able to put some of that money into something positive, like helping homeless LGBTQ youth, and make it a visible issue because it then becomes a segment on their show. We also were consultants on a show called The New Normal, which was a 2012 show about a gay male couple that as a surrogate is having a baby for them. And so NBCUniversal came to out at NBCU and they're like, we want to know if this is offensive to you guys. Okay? I was like, well, good for you. So I held focus groups and talked to people, LGBTQ employees, about their reactions to the show. And the people who were making the show took our notes. So again, I thought that was a really nice way to have a feedback. Okay, so, all right, this is maybe a little bit of a controversial slide, but again, it's my experience. Okay, that's all you're getting is my experience. Human resources in these big companies is there to protect the company from getting in lawsuits. Okay, so naive me, I was like, okay, human resources. Well, then if I got a problem with my boss or another employee, I can work with human resources. No. In these big companies, they're all there to make sure that the company doesn't get sued. The biggest motivator is how can we make sure the company won't be liable? In my experience, just my experience, HR is not there to protect LGBTQ individuals. In fact, they don't really want to talk about it. Okay? They don't really want to be different. Conflict resolution is a much lower priority. Their advice is work it out on yourselves. Okay. All right. I feel like I've said a lot of really heavy things, and I feel like I've been a little bit of a downer. Hopefully you can see I still have a lot of joy as an individual. So I really love what I do, and I really am very privileged to be LGBTQ because I feel like a lot of this is about the adventure of creating your life. You define what it means to you, okay? Expansiveness to the idea of identity, a refusal to be confined by expectations, social or otherwise, ways to think about who you could be. Part of what is really powerful about being LGBTQ is not falling into set social conventions from the past. You define it. And that's a very powerful thing. Fun fact, travel rules. Iceland, Egypt, Africa, Alaska, Amsterdam, Morocco, Hawaii. Is that a Moroccan town? It is. Okay. So I want to kind of end, I'm going to show you a clip, but I want to end with a quote. And that is, this is my favorite quote. And I'm going to link this back to my whole talk. So this is from a book called The Sheltering Sky by Paul Bowles. The quote is, "Death is always on the way. But the fact that you don't know when it will arrive seems to take away from the finiteness of life. Because we don't know, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. Yet everything happens a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? Some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 more? Perhaps not even. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. Yet it all seems so limitless." Okay, I'm going to link this back and just tell you that life is a gift, and life is an adventure, and you have to enjoy every single day and be yourself, whether it's in the media industries or wherever you are. And being LGBTQ is part of this experience. So don't look upon it as something that will hinder you or halt your advancement. Look upon it as something that enriches who you are, as a central part of your core. But life is not limitless. You have to live every day and enjoy it. Enjoy your life, enjoy what you've been given. So I want to show you a 5-minute clip. This is from NBCUniversal. They did a clip for the diversity groups. And what I'm interested in is how many, this, you got to think, this is a huge multinational conglomerate. They're putting together these clips of things that they believe are important for diversity. And what I'm kind of interested in is, in some ways I like it, but in some ways I'm like, it feels like they're checking off boxes, you know, rather than actually investing in it. But you tell me what you think, okay? So let's have a look at this clip. Yep.
NBC can now be really called the full color network.
Ew, sex with a boy.
Ching, ching, ching.
You completely suck at golf.
This little short family.
Directions. Perfect.
Stop what you're doing and only pay attention to me. Can we just go back to a regular Mexican restaurant? Not regular.
I'm just doing not going to Harrington.
Hi, I'm Eva Longoria, co-host of the Alma Awards Show on NBC.
Hello, see.
We were great deal, so.
Speak yourself out loud.
It's a physical positive time of heightened tension.
We'll see you tomorrow on Today. I'm Lester Bowles for all of us at NBC News.
Thanks for doing that.
We'll be live downtown looking forward to everybody live. Some rocks on top. NBC 5 and NBC 6.
NBC News.
Well, praise this car, honey.
Thank you.
I'm a divorced man who's loved you for 21 years.
I don't know this dance.
Right.
Look her, that's what she's there for. I wish I knew how to quit you.
I'm here to recruit you.
Well, come up.
Gravity wasn't going to be monogamous, was it?
All right, let's do this.
You know what?
Race car. Yeah, I'm getting it.
It's our thing. I was not in the black.
Thank you. That's so cool to be a cashier for the unconventional family. That's gay. That's homophobic. That's black. That's racist. We can have a revolution. We're all homos. Homo sapiens. Oh!
Oh, my goodness. I think we better be back tomorrow.
Yeah.
So guys, if you have any questions for me about anything that we presented or any ideas or anything that inspired that, please ask away. Yeah.
I'm not really sure if I understand what your job was when you lived in LA.
Sure. I was a market researcher, so what I did was literally I would understand what consumers and viewers thought about our TV shows. So I would conduct focus groups, I would do surveys, I would look at online polls, and I would then work with people at the network in communication and marketing and the production people to hone their messaging and the product. So for example, one of the networks I worked for was E! And I did a lot of work for Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And about 5 years ago, I spent the whole summer traveling around talking to viewers of the Kardashians. Like literally, I spent like 8 weeks doing focus groups around the country. And it's not my show. It's not like, I really have no interest in the Kardashians, right? And I thought, this is gonna be the worst summer of my life. But I started doing it, and I was so fascinated by what people had to tell me that I was like, wow, it's an eye-opener. Because it wasn't about the glitz and glam, it wasn't about the sex tape, it was two appeals to that show. One is the fantasy of having a large number of sisters. You can squabble with each of the sisters, but they have their back against anyone from the outside. And the fantasy of having a large blended family. Like that's, if you look at the appeal of the show, that's really what the appeal's around. It's not really around what they're wearing or, you know, the sex or the glam. Or, that's less important. Does that explain what I do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Related to your research, just a question. I believe it's Annenberg does a lot of research every year about representation,
Right.
Diversity on television channels. And the one thing I've always wondered is, and it's good to see the numbers. You know, that there's so many more white male faces, no matter what people say
Right.
about it changing and heterosexual. Obviously, that's like awesome.
Right.
The domination of that. But one thing I'm curious about is I never see anything about how audiences, if they're sensitive to that. Like, when you do research, do people ever bring that up in focus groups? Like, why are there so many white male faces on the show?
Absolutely.
What do they say? So, can you tell us what they say?
Sure. I tell you in general what they say. I mean, it's people want to see themselves represented. So, you know, if you're someone of color, you want to see some people of color being represented, and I get that. It makes sense to me. What I would tell you is, I was in two minds of this because I'm where you are. You look at what's on TV, it's mostly white middle class, heterosexuals. That's mostly what it is still. But I actually sat in meetings where people talked about the issue of representation and be like, we need to have a Latina in this role. And I would push this and would explain to me why, because it's important in terms of representation. This is a senior level executive at the company, and I was like, okay, that's good. I mean, they understand that. Now, here's the thing. Do they understand that because they think then that you're going to get a Latino audience watching and that it's more money? Maybe they do. Maybe it's all just the dollars, right? But they do at least make a link between representation and trying to do better. It's a pretty bad relationship. And what I would say is it's interesting because I taught this course on TV criticism. I did all this work on TV shows in the 70s. And I talked about these more Lear shows like Good Times, The Jeffersons. And what's interesting is the way that they were engaging with issues of race back in the 70s, it was more of a mixed audience watching. And now there's certain shows that are more heavily African-American, reality shows, comedy shows, that have a much more heavily African-American viewership that the white people aren't watching. Okay, and to me, that's a problem. You know? Like back in the 70s, which I know was 40 years ago, but a show like Good Times, okay, which is about a family living in the projects in Chicago, poor family, but a proud family. I was like a 10-year-old kid, white kid, obviously, white kid in Canada watching this show, all right? That, to me, taught me so much about what the African-American experience could be. Because guess what? I wasn't getting it anywhere else, you know? And what I took away from that show, those of you who are old enough to remember it, is just the love that that family had for each other, you know? And that, it wasn't so much the socioeconomic stuff that I took away, it was the love. I feel like I haven't answered your question. Yeah.
I was wondering about taking that question further, drilling down into the plot lines with the screenwriters. With
right.
The, you know, so you could have a person in that role, which may or could be anybody in that role, versus one that comes from the ground up organically that's Latino or African American. Because in that show, Good Times,
right.
I actually taught at the high school that's next to Cabrini Green, that opening scene.
Really?
Yeah, I did my student teaching there.
Yeah.
And so my experience of Cabrini and Wells High School there was different than Good Times. It was less happy.
Right.
It was a little more dangerous, but you know. Yeah, it's a different kind of experience. But I'm wondering if you notice any trends in the screenwriters are digging down a little deeper and getting into those experiences.
Not really. I mean, I think obviously there's an issue of representation in terms of who's in front of the camera. There's also an issue of who is the creative talent that is creating those representations. And if it's just white middle class guys who are creating representations about African American audiences, I'm sorry, that's a problem. All right? Obviously, it's a problem. That's why I think a movie like Moonlight, for example, is a really powerful film. Because that's a film, to me, I found really moving and uncompromising in the way that it was put together. And it came from a perspective that I thought, I have seen this before. But it's one film. Okay, yes, we won Best Picture, you know. But still, it's not enough. And America, these American media companies that I've worked for 15 years, have done a pretty sorrowful job about representing our nation, period. You know, I'm a new American, and I'm really happy to be an American. The one thing that stuns me as time goes on is how much of the history of this nation is about race. Like, it's the defining issue to me as a new American. And how the country is still, since it's social progress, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
To follow up, owning of cable or streaming opens up possibilities because they see differences there. They were taking more risks.
Yes, here's my problem with that. Get back to the 70s where there were 3 networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Everybody was engaged in culture in the same way because there was less opportunities. Now you can stream, you can do all these different things, but then you have 10 people watching, you know? So how do you make an intervention in culture? Like, how do you make a difference in culture? I don't know. You know, it's a really good question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk, Dr. Wyatt. I saw so many people taking pictures of your slides. So it resonates with people. So here's my question. Not all of us in the room work in media industries,
right.
But we might do something in our scholarship and our activism where a person from the media calls us or emails us. So
right.
It could be your local publication, it could be BuzzFeed, Salon, Slate, it could you know, in the AP, it could be anywhere in between those things. And so can you give some advice to people who are maybe young activists, young scholars, young professionals about if you're nervous to answer the call from a media organization asking you to talk about queer issues or issues of race or whatever?
I think you should be nervous because guess what? 99% of the time, they take the sound bite. It's the sexiest sound bite. It's going to get most people to pay attention. So, you know, I've actually stopped doing interviews for the media. I get asked quite a bit because I don't want to do it anymore, you know? Or I literally ask, I'd like to see that quote before it is published. So I know that it's not taken out of context, and they're not taking the 3 words that I said being glib or off the cuff and using it to really position my whole argument. So it's a huge issue, because otherwise people would be like, well, they should be talking to us. Of course they should be talking to us. But, you know, don't get me started with false news and fake news and all that. But it's just amazing to me the level at which we've sunk as a society. Really, you know? I mean, part of it,
I believe
in my mid-50s, early 50s, I really feel, when I talk to my students, that our generation has failed them. Like, literally, life should be much better for your students than it was for your generation, and it isn't. And there's something really wrong about that. It's kind of how I feel. Yeah.
But I mean, I guess, so I definitely have these concerns, right, that they take the one soundbite that's not the one you meant. But,
right.
But I guess the flip side to that, though, is that if they don't call you, if they don't call someone who is actively involved, who knows about the topic, they're going to call somebody else who is going to give them some BS quote. You know, and so I guess how do you balance those, right? Like, maybe how do you vet a source, or how do you decide to say yes, I guess is maybe the bare minimum for today's standards, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have found that literally asking to see the quote is a really good, I mean, and you do it in a non-threatening way. You know, I would like to see that, please, you know, before you go to publication. That actually, I'd say 80% of the time, I get a yes to that request.
Would you withdraw? Would you say, like, you can't use my quote if you don't send it, or is that not something you can say?
I haven't gone to that level, but I might do. Only because I feel like part of the problem with this wonderful internet generation is that there's so much information bubbling around all the time, and everything's sexy and everything look right here, right now, and yet, you know, it can do a lot of damage, and I think it really impacts people in a lot of negative ways. I mean, I see the high school kids, I'm like, how do you even get through high school anymore? You know? It's like shocking to me, like how difficult it is. How scary. Yeah?
Since you have experience with these networks, what advice would you give to a student here that wants to go into these networks and work on them?
Okay, what I would say is start with internships. So literally, you'd be like, okay, there aren't a lot of internships in Norfolk, and there's not a lot of internships here. I get it. But literally, try and do internships with something that's media related. So it could be for like a local advertising company or a PR company where you get some kind of media connection. You know, do an internship, because literally, you know, when people are looking to hire people, they want to know that you have some practical skills and that you've been in a work environment. And doing an internship or two is absolutely the way in the door. Now, if you had the opportunity to spend the summer in New York or LA or, you know, a big city and do an internship, which I know, like, who has the money to do that? That's even better, you know? But what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be a big company. It can be a smaller company, a local company that has some kind of media connection. Absolutely do that. And then literally, I would get your professors to have a look at your resume before you send it out and get some advice. Yeah.
I was going to, the other thing is, we have alumni. Search out your alumni associations and ask people, you know, go to the alumni center and say, hey, look, I'm about to graduate, or I'm a junior and I want to connect with alumni here, because Monarch Nation is, I don't know, we got probably 100,000 alumni, and you should be able to draw from that network and be willing to, I don't know, exist on ramen for one more year. I mean, that sounds, I don't know, like, how you got involved. It sounds like you were in Los Angeles, but people go to Los Angeles and sleep on floors and sleep on couches.
I actually prolonged my graduate career, because even though I was studying critical studies, because I did internships.
Right.
So I spent 2 extra quarters doing my graduate career, but I did 3 different internships. So I thought, this is going to be a chance, if I ever want to go work in the industry, to get some practical experience. So I worked at like a home video company, I worked at Warner Brothers, and I worked for a development company.
What were those jobs? What were those baseline jobs?
Baseline jobs, well, there's two kinds of baseline jobs. If you want to work in production and you want to work in development, you're somebody's assistant, and that literally is answering the phone. You'd be like, I don't want to answer the phone, I went to college. Okay, here's the thing about answering the phone. I can tell you, I've seen so many people who started out answering the phone. In 2 years, they're manager. In 5 years, they're director. In 7 years, they're vice president. You move up pretty quickly. Because what happens is you're answering the phone, but if you're working development, you listen to pitches of projects with your boss all the time. So you're getting all that experience. So don't think that something's beneath you because you're just graduated and have lots of knowledge, you spent 4 years getting your degree. Yes, it's all great. But again, pay your dues, but also see what you can learn from every opportunity, even answering the phone. You know, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to meet a lot of people and have a chance to see you as a professional person, how you interact with others. What you say to your boss, hey, would it be okay if I sat in on this meeting with you, just took notes? And they'd be like, that's great initiative. I like that, is what they will say to you. Okay? You create your life, you create the learning opportunities. You know? So, and don't worry if it takes 2 or 3 years to get your foot in the door to where you want to be. It's going to take some time. But if you're persistent and you know the value you have in yourself, you'll get there. Other questions? Yeah.
Tonight is the season premiere of the reboot Will and Grace.
Right.
Aside from the fact that Karen Walker is my alter ego, we can talk about that later. What do you make of that? Is that something that is nostalgia? Is it something that you see a potential to contribute to more of gay and lesbian culture? How is it? Because I know it was immensely popular in the 90s. It's back.
Yeah, I think part of what's interesting about these epic-based shows or these series, these movies, is how a lot of times they embody certain stereotypes that play both ways. You know, so the stereotypes that straight culture is very happy are out there. So it's like back in the 90s, people are like, oh, you're just like, just Jack. And I'm like, no, not really. You know? But that's how they're comfortable seeing me as a gay man by putting me in that category. So I'm kind of nervous a little bit because I'm thinking, okay, haven't we moved beyond that? You know, in terms of the stereotypes, maybe we haven't. You know, a good example is this movie, The Birdcage. Okay, came out in the mid-90s. Drag queens, Nathan Lane, Robert Williams. I had so many people who said to me in the industry, oh, well, you're gay? You must love The Birdcage. And I'm like, no, I don't, actually. You know, but they just like assumed, because it was like a big gay movie, that I would like it. No. So I'm worried about stereotypes coming back. I'm worried about kind of reinforcing, taking the gay community back 15 years as opposed to moving forward. Eventually. I agree. Yeah. Guys, have other questions for me? Yeah.
Have you had any experience in streaming services, HBO, Netflix? And what do you think of like creating your own opportunity as far as the internet?
I think whatever you can do to make an impact and to create a reel of your own material is good. I don't care if you only have 6 people watching it. What you want to do is use it as a calling card to get you somewhere else. So I think all that's good. I think it's hard to make an intervention commercially. You know, this is the new streaming service. And I think the Netflix Hulu model, even though it's really hot right now, I don't believe actually that it's sustainable over a long period of time. So those are much bigger questions. But I would say in terms of creative activity and where you can help you, go for it and then use it to get some notes. Yeah.
All right, so I'm a senior this year.
Yeah.
And I have an opportunity to move to Los Angeles next year.
Right.
What advice would you give a fresh graduate just moving to Los Angeles? I noticed you have to sleep on the floor a lot. I'm really nervous about that. You know, it's a huge risk, and I just don't want to go there and then homeless or something like that because I'm chasing careers and opportunities. So, what advice would you give?
My advice is to get a network, even just 4 or 5 people that you know out there. Okay, so that when you move out there, you're going to have people who your safe zone that you can always count on. LA is a seductive place because it's 72 and sunny all the time. Okay, and everybody is tanned and they all work out. It's about which gym you've gone to, what protein shake you drank, and all the women are like 100 pounds. Okay, everybody's beautiful. However, I lived 3 separate times. Each time I liked it less because I found it more difficult to make real friends, to make a human connection with other people. When I was 21 and in graduate school, going to the beach in October was huge. You know? Later on in my life, I found LA to be, in some ways, a cruel place because people are going to be like, oh, you're great, hugs, and then you never see them again. I prefer the East Coast because I think people are a little bit more real. That's what I would tell you. If you want to work in the media industry, go to LA. I would encourage you to do it. But even the way that you're asking your question shows to me that you've thought through some of the pitfalls, and that's good. Because 90% of the people who go, they're thinking through. It's like, oh, I'm so happy to be here, and then things happen. So know the pitfalls, but know that it's an industry town. Like what Detroit was for cars, LA was for entertainment. So that's where you want to be. And I would say, don't go to New York. It's not the same.
That was my next question.
Yeah, don't go to New York.
How about Atlanta?
Atlanta, I would say there is definitely a burgeoning industry there. I would say that probably long term there's more opportunities to move around company to company in LA than there would be in Atlanta. But I still want you to go to LA, don't get me wrong. But if you want to start in Atlanta and then move to LA 5 to 10 years down the line, that could be another option. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
How do you make yourself stand out? Because this is such a competitive market, and like you said, like talking about LA, everybody's there.
Right.
Everybody, what you do, you might think is unique, but the next person could do it better. And how do you
It's all about the one-on-one, getting in front of somebody. Okay. So it's people say it's all about your resume. No, not really. It's really trying to get your foot in the door to actually meet somebody. So I found that the best way that you can make a connection or talk to somebody is actually don't do it on the phone, don't do it by email, don't do it by text. Try and talk to them face to face. Because they can see that you're smart, that you're talented, that you're driven, that you want to do things with your life. All that comes through. So as many opportunities as you can to get to talk to somebody one-on-one, do it. Now here's a little hint. When I was back in graduate school and I was doing the internships, I did what I called informational interviews. They weren't job interviews, but just like, I'm interested in marketing, and I'd love to hear what this marketing executive, I looked up her name online, what she did at Paramount. So I would write her an email saying, hey, listen, I'm a grad student writing a paper on this. Could I take 15 minutes of your time to come and talk to you? Okay, I did that. One thing led to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And you build a huge network of people. Because guess what? You talk to me, and I'm like, oh, you're really cool. You should talk to my friend Joe over at this company. And that's exactly how things work in terms of networking, you know? It doesn't really work the same way doing it online. It doesn't really work the same way doing it by email. I can ignore an email, so I get hundreds a day, but I'm not going to ignore you if you're right here in my office. I'm going to engage with you, and you will make an impact on me.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, make sure to follow @StromeEC to tune in next time.